As you can tell with this card, we're coming out of the gate swinging with our first entry on the list, Jinzo Lord. Like the real-life Jinzo Lord, you can send a Jinzo from the field to the graveyard to summon it, and it has the standard no traps on field effect. However, what sets it apart is how you can look at all cards in the opponent's hand and back row to pop all traps and burn for 400 per trap. Being able to look into the opponent's hand and back row makes it a more than powerful boss monster from GX of all time periods. Hand knowledge, and it comes off of a great monster in the first place in a game where extremely powerful traps are running around? Sign me up! Just make sure your opponent won't be doing any Mind Crush rule sharking on you, and you will be golden. Number 9 is an interesting one, given its main utility as a boss monster is how generic it is and the use of other cards with it. Beastborg Panther Predator was the boss of Barret from Arc 5. You know, the guy... Nah, actually, there's nothing to note about him. I keep thinking of Battle Beast whenever I hear the name, and that reminds me that Crow got his wings clipped, and that makes me sad. Ah, right, the monster. To make it, you fuse any level 4 or lower Beast Warrior with any level 4 or lower machine, meaning you have a lot of creativity when making it. These two types, in and of themselves, are some of the most supported in the game, with amazing archetypes and support cards, like Fire Fist or Machine Dupe, respectively. As for its effect, you can burn the opponent for half of its attack once per turn, and if it gets destroyed by battle, the materials get revived from the graveyard if they stayed there. Okay, so an 800 burn may seem underwhelming, considering the most it has going for it at first glance is being another cowboy, but what helps it set it apart is the fact that the burn will stack with its attack buffs. As well as one other interesting card, Beastborn Metal of the Blade, which can help its attack buffs with the power to add numbers of counters based on damage the opponent takes to buff its attack further. We don't consider anime cards outside of the card itself and directly related cards. Be sure to check the Worst Anime Exceeds list for a full and complete explanation, but it's worth bringing up as a fun deck to play online. The sheer general use of it and the fact it stacks with attack gains helps make it one hell of an offensive threat or a game ender. And both are good roles to fill for any fusion that floats into probably two good cards. The card in and of itself would make for a fun deck to try and build, and I'd love to see what you guys come up with. Ever wanted to say screw the rules of the game and go beyond the pendulum scales? Odd Eyes Fantasma Dragon may be the card for you! You see, if you have the scales set up and there's an Odd Eyes monster in the extra deck, you can pendulum summon Fantasma Dragon regardless of what your scales are. It's like Spell Striker levels of, it might as well just say it can be special summoned inherently. In addition, it's a 3k beater that can weaken any monster it battles by 1000 for each face-up pendulum monster in your extra deck. So not only can it be pendulum summoned, no matter the scale, but it can weaken the opponent to 0 a majority of the time. I may rag on monsters for just being a lot of work for a really big number, but all that changes when there is no work whatsoever. I find it so funny that its second effect makes me think immediately of running this in Ignites just to flex on Thine decks, which I guess you could do, but the power of this card goes beyond even memes. Next up is a Link monster that, for how stupid a concept the deck is certainly a powerhouse of absolute madness. Tesseract Hydra Drive Monarch is a Link 4 3000 attack that not only sounds like some technobabble you would hear on Mr. Robot that you straight up have to Google as soon as you hear it to know it's a real thing, but it also needs 4 Hydra Drive links with the same attribute to make. Trust me though, the struggle will be worth it, especially since this deck falls into the generic Link spam category that has a lot of generic support for it. When Star Trek Ship 1147 is special summoned, it is treated as fire, water, and wind on top of being an earth monster, and negates the effects of all monsters with the same attribute as him, effectively making Doriato's effect a lot more useful in exchange for the cute girl look. If that wasn't enough, then this is going for the overkill. When it battles, you can force the opponent to send a monster they control with the same attribute as Tesseract to the graveyard to attack a monster again in a row, more than likely just killing it and dealing heaps of damage to your opponent. Even if this mechanical monstrosity dies, you can pay 1000 life points to bring it back and double its attack to 6k, but it gets banished at the end phase. Meaning that on top of being an annoyance, it's a massive swing for game held back only by being part of a crappy attribute stun deck and needing something specific to make it. Hence why it's only number 7 and not any higher, as it does take a certain amount of work. Dude looked at Ally of Justice, laughed, and figured he could take down all of the dual terminal races at once, and I would put money on him in that fight. In Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal, Don 1000 gave 4 users fake versions of numbers 1 through 4 to use in order to fight Yuma and the gang. This makes sense, as Don 1000 used the real ones, and Jesus Christ, if they ever get ported over, they'll need the Card of Sanctity treatment. One of those fake number holders was Mr. Heartland, with his Infection deck that leads us to our number 6 entry. Fake number 1, Infection Buzz King. To start, you need 3 level 8s to make it, which is generally kind of easy to make happen. Aside from Numbers Clause, you can send a monster from the opponent's extra deck to the graveyard upon Xyz Summon, and yes, you do get to choose, making this a neat stun option inherently. As well, once per turn, you can attach a number monster from the opponent's graveyard to it as a material while detaching one material to pop a card, and it has an added Volcasaurus effect if that card was indeed a monster. If that sounds circumstantial, know that numbers are actually everywhere, not the least of which being the Utopia package. What is quite powerful is how, if you time it right, you can use the detach pop by detaching their number and then re-equipping it again and again. Kind of like Lumina discarding Lumina to summon Lumina in Lightsworns without needing another Lightsworn in grave. Effectively, you get a Volcasaurus with a constantly recycling material. And even if there are no numbers, being able to mill out a Borreload or a nasty extra deck monster for free is always a blast, especially combined with it being rank 8 and dark, meaning you have plenty of method to make it, like Phantom Knights of Launch, and in general rank 8 spam. Truly a powerful addition to any rank 8 toolbox, Lord knows they needed it. With Vetrix's deck, this monster kind of got overshadowed by Heraldry Crest, as, you know, number 69 is kind of incredibly broken. But rest assured, this card still has its own strengths. Number 8, Genome Heritage, takes 2 Heraldic Beasts to make, has Number Claws, and can detach a material to activate one of 3 effects. It can make a monster's attack 0 and steal the monster's attack, negate an attack by a monster the opponent has while stealing that monster's effects, and finally, it can steal a monster's name while the original monster's name becomes unknown. Admittedly, the third part is only useful for archetypical cards that are very specific, making this the most specific counter card possible. It's funny in its own right, but what really makes the list are 2 other parts of that effect. Being able to steal the effects via a negate attack and snatching the attack of the monster makes this a powerful threat. Not as powerful as Heraldry Crest, but you know, Pot of Greed isn't as good as Anime Card of Demise either, but they're still fundamentally broken. Ah, Weevil, you dirty, rotten stink bug, you. You were the OG cheater and got murdered savagely by Doro Monstacardo, and that's what makes folks hate your entire soulless being. I'm not giving a rant like I did with Fortuno, if that's what you're imagining. Too bad your gimmick of waiting turns was a blow until Legendary Duelist 2, otherwise this card more than likely would have never made the list. Great Moth! Let that sink into your minds. Great Moth is normally the result of Petite Moth plus the Cocoon of Evolution for 4 of your own turns. But thanks to Parasite Paranoid and Cocoon of Ultra Evolution, this card is much easier to bring out. And for that, what you get is an absolutely hilarious effect that is also strong as hell. You see, it gains an effect at the end of the damage step after battling once. That effect being, your opponent's monsters will lose 100 attack and defense at the start of every phase. You heard right. Draw phase, standby phase, main phase, the whole deal. Combine this with Metamorphosed Insect Queen for targeting and destruction protection and Block Spider Lock for attacking. That makes it so the opponent needs to waste a kaiju to get over this massive moth. Don't even get me started on if we applied the Duelist Kingdom effect straight up, where the attack goes down based on actual real-life time and monsters brought down to 0 die. You can just read a card or check your phone or something and it's a board wipe. Opponent summon a monster? Just read the card until it dies to the Great Moth time limit, because this goes on for all monsters at all times except for the Bug of the Hour himself. Thank you, Duelist Kingdom. Number 3 is a tie between 2 members of the legendary Planet series from GX. First up, we have Suppression Pluto. This big level 8 has 2600 attack, and once per turn you can declare a card name. If the opponent has the named card or cards in their hand, you can take control of 1 card your opponent controls. Powerful effect that could just as well have been an entry all on its own, if not for recent rulings change. That would make this a bit more meme-worthy than anything. As for the other entry, we have the Supremacy Sun, aka the main villain's boss from the GX manga. Got taken down by our boy Matt. You see, during your standby phase, if it's in the graveyard, it returns to the field, meaning it constantly returns to the field unless your opponent wastes a card that banishes it away. Yeah, sure, they're gonna take a Dark Core to the Sun. Why not? Let's just keep in mind that the other members of this series are all pretty good too, especially since, I don't know, 1 is banned in the TCG anyways because Instant Fusion is such a fair card, guys. This spot is only reserved for the largest and the smallest entries in our solar system, and we can keep it that way for now. Ever wonder the fear of Tomahawk, but as a fusion? That's where Fortress Drone Beehive comes into play. You see, this monster takes 2 or more drones to make, and gains drone counters for the total levels of its materials. As well, you can spend any number of counters to spawn that many in drone tokens, and that's not a once per turn effect. As well, it gains 1000 attack for each drone other than himself. In a sense, you have a massive boss that spams tokens for link plays, or could just punch your opponent so hard their spine falls out. Even more hilarious is a spell used with them to give those tokens the same attack as Beehive if they're attacked. Still not considered for the list, but that's just too funny not to mention. Sadly, this was the last thing Blood Shepherd gave us, but rest assured he went out with a bang. Number 1 is no question here. It's Obelisk the Tormentor, the second best Egyptian god from the show and the manga. Sorry Yugi, sorry Slifer. To start, Divine Hierarchy BS. If you don't know what that is, go watch the first video for info there as I discuss it with the Winged Dragon of Ra. I will also be making a video talking about every Egyptian god in detail, just because I think everyone wants a video to bring to their friends and explain exactly what every god card could do, because who's going to read them? Along with that, all Divine Hierarchy monsters share the only affected by cards for 1 turn clause. What makes Obelisk stand apart, though, is his unique effects. When he is able to attack, you contribute 2 monsters to burn the opponent for a massive 4k attack, and Raigeki the opponent, which might as well just win the game right then and there, quite honestly. What more, you contribute 2 monsters when he does battle to make his attack equal to infinity for the damage step. This is the kind of beatstick I can get behind. Minimal setup, only requiring 3 monsters, great recurring protection, great protection in general, utility in the board wiping effect, and infinity is kind of as far as a beatstick can get without making up garbage against an Atlantean. Obelisk the Tormentor certainly is the most broken boss monster on this list, only not on the last one because that was the special spot for Ra. But this time, it's Kaiba's time to shine.